The Utah legislature gets sued again over a constitutional amendment. I'm Brian Schott, an independent journalist covering politics here in Utah. I've been covering it for more than 25 years. You can follow me here, or you can check out my work at utahpoliticalwatch.news. The Utah Education Association filed a lawsuit on Thursday challenging Amendment A, claiming that the ballot language that lawmakers are using for this amendment is misleading and that they didn't meet the constitutional requirements to publicize that language before the election. What lawmakers want to do with Amendment A is open up that constitutional earmark for education funding so that they can use that money for other things in the budget. In that constitutional amendment, it says that the legislature is required to maintain a statutory framework to fund education and cover inflationary costs and increases in student enrollment, but there's nothing concrete in there. There's no specific numbers, nothing like that at all. In order to make voting for that constitutional amendment more appealing, lawmakers passed a law that would remove the state portion of the sales tax on food, but that only goes into effect if Amendment A is passed. And they also approved an increase to the weighted pupil unit, which is how they measure per pupil funding in schools, but that also will only go into effect if Amendment A passes. The language that lawmakers approved for the ballot asks if the Utah Constitution should be amended to allow income tax money to be used for all state needs and to prioritize public education funding for changes in enrollment and inflation. The Utah Education Association in this lawsuit today says that that's misleading because the actual amendment does not prioritize public education funding. And in their argument, and I'm reading here, says the proposed amendment does not in fact give priority to public education, but rather only to a vague and unspecified statutory public education funding framework that does not, in fact, guarantee any particular funding to public education. There's also a requirement in the Constitution that any proposed amendment that is to be put on the ballot has to be published in a newspaper for 2 months prior to the election, and the UEA says that didn't happen. These are exactly the same arguments that were used to void Amendment D earlier this month. You may remember Amendment D is a proposed constitutional change that would give the legislature almost unlimited power to repeal any initiative passed by the voters. Thursday's filing is actually an addition to a previous lawsuit that the Utah Education Association filed earlier this year, challenging the voucher program that lawmakers passed. Is known as the Utah Fits All Scholarship, and that allows people to take public education money to pay for private schools. They have challenged that in court, and they've added this onto that. The UEA says that they're filing this supplemental part to the lawsuit because if Amendment A passes, that makes their challenge to the voucher program moot because lawmakers are able to tap that income tax money for whatever, and they were claiming that you cannot use public education money to pay for private school vouchers under the Constitution the way it stands. The relief that they're seeking is asking for this amendment to be voided because it's too late to take it off the ballot because they'd have to reprint the ballots and we're too close to the election. So what they want it is voided so that any votes cast would not be counted. But that also opens the opportunity for the Utah legislature to appeal the ruling if it is indeed taken off the ballot, just like they're doing with the Amendment D court challenge that'll be in front of the Utah Supreme Court next week.